Okay, so when you're in Illustrator, usually by default, when you create objects, so I'm just going to choose my shapes, and we'll make a bunch of different random colored shape things. So I'll have a blue circle, maybe red polygon. Let's get a dark green square. So different shapes. The normal way that they interact with one another is if one's on top of it, it completely clears it out. So the pixels that are on top of this one cover up the pixels that are behind it. And of course, if we want to change the stacking order of it, you can adjust the arrangement of it by Object and Arrange, and you can bring it backwards or forwards from there. But what I want to do is I want to be able to blend the colors from one object into any object that's below it. And to do that, I need to change the transparency or the blending mode of the objects that I'm working on. And if you look on the board up here, I'll use these terms kind of interchangeably. Sometimes I'll say transparency, sometimes I'll say blending mode. And essentially it's the same thing. I'll show you in the palette which one I'm talking about. So if I say change your blending mode or change your transparency mode, usually one of these is what I'm talking about. So we'll jump back to the screen. The palette that you're going to need open is your transparency palette. And it's one of those default ones on the right-hand side, so I'll drag it off just so we can see it from here. Whenever you select an object, you'll notice you get a little preview of it in your transparency. So if I clicked on this one, you get a preview of that, preview of whichever one that you have selected. Even if you select multiple objects, you can affect multiple ones at the same time. By default, the mode that you're working in, and you can see it's called the blending mode, is normal. And it just means it's normally going to cover up the pixels. If you click on it, you get these kind of groupings of different other types of styles. And these will come into play once we start using Photoshop as well. So this is something that goes across different software. But if you change the blending mode, let's say I chose multiply, all of a sudden the color of this one is being, quote, multiplied. It's being added to the color that's below it. And it's going to give you different results based on the colors. And I wrote them on the board. In general, multiply will make your colors darker. So it's going to multiply two different colors together. Whereas screen will make them lighter. It'll screen out certain colors. Overlay affects midtones, and the hue will affect just the color or the value of what you're working with. It's easier said than done, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. So notice that multiply and darken, they generally do the same thing. If I chose screen, you can see it gets a little bit lighter. If I chose overlay, like I said, it's going to affect the midtones. You can see it gets darker here, but it doesn't affect this one on top. Hue or color changes it to be that particular color, but keeps the same value of what it is. And whereas multiply, you see, changes it out over the entire thing. So that's fun, but what can you do with it? Well, it really shows up well when you have a picture of something more than just an object itself. So if I wanted to colorize this picture, I've gotten this selected. I can place it over his image, and you can see now it'll colorize in the shape of whatever shape that I have that particular image. And right now it's set to multiply, but if I chose, say, screen, you can see now I'm picking up the highlights of it, and it's only affecting the darker shadows. Or if I chose overlay, now I'm getting dark darks and the nice highlights, and all the midtones are becoming red. Is this making sense now? And this works for pretty much any type of color that you may happen to choose. And you're going to get sometimes different results. Sometimes it's difficult to tell what result you get until you actually choose the color that you want. So changing the transparency changes up, that's kind of cool, the difference. It gives you the inverse of it. It changes how the pixels or how the colors interact with one another when you change your blending mode. We set it back to normal. Of course, it'll be normal working from there. Another thing to know about the transparency palette is the opacity of an object that you're working with. Sometimes you just want to keep it the same color, but you want it to make it opaque. You want to see through it. And so by adjusting the opacity of it, by clicking this number and dragging down, you can make it 50%, 40%, however opaque you want it to be, all the way down to 0%. All cool? Did I blow everybody away on that one? Very, very simple, but especially in Photoshop, once we start working in layers and not just objects, changing your transparency and changing your blending mode is a very powerful way of creating something that's completely different. It's a very digital way of making something. You can't do that with a paintbrush, not easily at least. So for today's project, what you're going to do is you're going to download those textures that we have. In this case, the cotton candy texture and the speckles texture. And when you place them in here, we're going to change the blending mode, and that'll give you this kind of textured type look to your document that you're creating. So let's see. We'll create File and New. And we're just going to make this on a regular letter size sheet of paper. And I'm going to make it landscape orientation. And we'll say OK. All I'm going to do is go down one at a time, point by point, and just show you exactly what we're going to do to make this off. Try not to skip over anything and read each of the instructions very, very carefully, because if you skip over something, chances are you skipped over something that you definitely need to know. So I've downloaded the two textures. I've created my new artboard. Let's create the sky in the background. We're going to work from the background to the foreground. So I'll choose my rectangle tool, and I need it to be a specific size, 7 inches by 3 inches tall. So in this case, if you click once, 7 by 3, we'll say OK. I want to fill it in with a linear gradient going from light blue to a medium blue. And so remember, if you want to have your gradient opened up, we need to have the gradient palette. I'll just drag it off from here. You're going to be using this a lot. Click here to turn on the gradient. And let's see, so a light blue to a medium blue. So let's change this one to a light blue. To a medium blue, right about there. Let's make this one even lighter. Double click. Remember, if you want to change a color that's not in your predefined ones, you can click here, and this will allow you to move your sliders to get something a little bit lighter that we're working with. That looks pretty good. And we'll change the direction of it to 90 degrees. So lighter to darker. And we also need to turn off the stroke. So I'm going to select my stroke, click that. Now all I have is just my sky that's created. Creating the ground is just as simple too. So 7 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall. And we're going to fill it in with just a solid color of a light tan. Oops. Make sure you have your fill color on top before you select your color that you want. All right. So I've got my ground plane set up, got my horizon, and I've got my sky going from there. Next thing we're going to do is create the sun. So sun is using the star tool. One click. We want the radius to be 1 to be 5 inches, radius 2 to be 1/2 inch. So very wide but very small. And the number of points is going to be 35. So it'll look something like this. And we'll give it a radial gradient from going from orange to white. So we'll place it over here. Turn on my gradient. In this case, we'll go from orange to white. And of course, we need to make this radial. Alrighty. And stroke of none. So we're going to place this over, let's see. Yeah, place a perfect circle over the center. And this one's going to be a white to yellow circle. So perfect circle. What can I hold down to go from the center point outward? Option. What can I hold down to get a perfect circle? So I'm holding Shift and Option to get a perfect circle from the center point out. Whoops. Then it's simply a matter of changing it up, in this case going from white to yellow. And let's see, and of course I need to make it a little bit smaller. Maybe I want to see the edges from there. Now it's going to be okay if it goes off the edges of your paper, because we're going to clean that up at the end. If you look at the one that I created, notice that you can't see anything on the side. Well, that's because all I did was make some white boxes and just placed it over the edge before I printed. That's kind of the quick and dirty way of cleaning up the edges that we'll work for. So if yours looks like this, totally fine. At the end, we're going to clean it up. So going back to this one, once I've created that, I've got to be able to send this backwards. So Shift Command in the open bracket, left bracket, will send it to the back, and then the forward bracket will bring it forward. Let's move it down just a little bit, all the way to the horizon. Cool. Why would I place the sun right here? Can anybody tell me what composition technique I'm using? Rule of thirds, very good. It's one of those things you see in a lot of different compositions to place something. If you'll divide it up into sections of 3, put it right there on that third of the line, and in general it usually works out pretty much better. So creating the clouds. With this one we're going to use the pencil tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just set my linear gradient to go from light blue to white. So already got my white set up. Change it to a light blue. And we'll make it regular linear. So now when I draw something off, I'm going to draw kind of cartoonish type clouds. Aha! I drew it off, but it didn't fill it in. That's probably because I had fill turned off. Remember, you can double click the pencil. There we go. We want to fill it in with anything that we created. So let's try that again. Turn it on. Now when I draw the cloud, there we go. Filled in that way. Of course I can move that point over to get it to go good. I'm going to create about 3 or so different clouds, different sizes. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Ooh, that one didn't pick up anything that I had. And to give me a variety of them, I can move them around and place them one on top of each other. So if I have this one, I can make a copy of it, change up the size of it, and I don't have to necessarily redraw a dozen different clouds. I can just use the same ones and recopy it and place them on top of each other. Usually clouds get smaller the further down the horizon they are. So you may want to make some of them really small and lower down some of them that are closer to you a lot taller. You can even flip them around. Move them as well. Oops. Be careful to not to select more than one thing. One kind of fun thing you can do is put some of the clouds behind the sun rays. So it looks like the sun is even going behind the cloud and gives your composition a little bit more depth. But I'll leave that up to y'all how you want to do it. But I use my pencil tool, create 2 or 3 different clouds, and be able to copy them and move them around and change them up for what you're using from there. So here's the next thing. We're going to place a texture into your composition, and this is going to add that speckled type of look to what you're working from. So to place an image, first of all, I know I've downloaded it to my desktop. Yours may be in the Downloads folder if you download yours, but you can go to File and Place. And just like in InDesign, you find where it is. In our case, we want speckles. And we'll place it on top. This time, we're just going to resize it to fill the upper portion of it, not the entire thing. So up here. Then we're going to change the transparency mode, the blending mode, to screen. So under transparency, instead of normal, when I change it to screen, it's only going to affect the lighter pixels, and it's going to look in general like this. So instead of having a solid color, now I've got something that has a little bit more texture to it, looks a little bit better. If you think it's too light, for instance, I kind of think it's a little bit light down here, I'll also change the opacity of it. So I didn't have that on your instructions, but if you want to change the opacity of it, that's okay too. And that kind of lightens it up so you can see more of the colors. So changing both the screen and the opacity is what allows you to get that. Now let's actually draw off the mountains and the canyon wall. I'll zoom in so we can see this. As with the other ones, you can use your pencil tool. We'll change our fill color to a, let's see, a light orange it says. Oh, no, excuse me, dark brown. Skipping over one. And to create the mountains, in general, all I'm doing is giving myself a mountain range. I'm going to let it dip down as it gets towards here, and then come back up on this side. Dip in, come back around for there. That's what I'm looking for. Dark brown, dips down towards there. If I do need to move it, let's say I move this up a little bit to cover up my horizon from there. Then we'll start creating, it's supposed to be like a canyon. So you've got two different walls on each side. In this case, we'll choose the light orange for the top. And all I'm going to do is draw off this side and then also this side for my canyon. Following along the horizon. And I'm going to go in and out, kind of like you're snaking it, towards this way. So I've got one side of it created, same way on this side. Start on this one, then go in and out. Create it on that side. For the walls of it, we're going to choose a slightly darker color. In my case, it would be kind of a dark brown. And let's see here. I'm going to go around and sort of follow the edges of it. Back around to the starting point. So with this one, I need to send it backwards. So let's select it. And send backwards. We'll do it twice since there's two of them below it. Arrange, send backwards. So now I've got a canyon wall that's below that one. Same thing for the other side. Around. Select it, send it to backwards. Now I've started to create it on that side. Coming together, looking cool. And the last thing I want you to do is to add just some shadow shapes to it. And those are these little extra areas that are kind of jutting out to give it kind of a cartoonish type shadow effect. And to do that, let's see, maybe I need to make my canyon walls a little bit lighter. So instead of this middle brown, maybe it'll be even lighter. So my shadows will show up. Make those a darker brown. All I'm doing is overlapping the different shapes. Now instead of selecting each one and trying to send it back, I'm going to hold down Shift and select all of them. And just do Shift Command bracket key. Oops. Not Shift Command, just Shift bracket key. Aha! That one needs to be even below those. And send everything to the back until they're in proper order. All good? Have I lost everybody? Next thing is creating the river. You can use this using the pen tool. And you'll notice the river is made up of 3 different colors of blue. So you've got kind of a darker blue or a medium blue. You've got a lighter blue and almost a white type blue on top of it. So with this one, we'll choose this medium blue. And just as the canyon gets smaller towards the horizon and larger, we want to draw the river going that way as well. All I'm doing is clicking and dragging and letting it curve and kind of follow the edge of your canyon. All the way back, we'll go even back to there. And so when I come back, I'm following the edge of it as well. Remember, you can hold down your space bar to move a point around if you need to. And letting it get wider as it comes closer to me. So now it's going off into perspective. We'll close it off. Do the same thing for lighter on the inside. So we'll choose a slightly lighter color. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is your river. This is your landscape. If you see a happy tree in it, paint that happy tree. And then to add some highlights, I just use white. And these are real fun. Because all I'm doing is just kind of clicking and dragging. I'm not really thinking about it, I'm just kind of clicking and dragging. And it's creating those almost stylized, cartoonish type ripples. You can do yours a little bit better. If you did want to use the pencil tool, you can use the pencil, draw it off really quickly, and you get the same type of effect. Maybe even easier for you to use. But this is giving you practice with your hand-eye coordination and also using the tools. Okay, sort of coming together for there. The last thing is to create the bushes on each side. And the bushes, these are going to be kind of a bluish green, and we're going to use a paintbrush that has a rough edge to it. So my fill color, set it to blue-green, and also my stroke color is going to be blue-green as well. So both of them need to be the same. And I'm going to double-click this to make sure, yeah, Fill New Brush Strokes is also turned on. And let's see, I do need a brush. I want to use this one. And when I draw one of them, there we go, it'll give it kind of that rough edge. And I can change up the width of it if necessary to make it a little bit bigger. As with the clouds, if you make a copy of these, you can change up the size, but in general, the further back they go, you want them to be a lot smaller. And you can change up their rotation, draw 2 or 3 different ones, but you wouldn't want one to be in the back to be like super huge, because in general, going in perspective, you want them to be receding off into the background. All right. Last thing, and this is something that I've kind of gotten into a habit of doing. If you want your composition to have kind of a unified look, in other words, if you want it to look like it's not just a bunch of random different things, but the colors are the same and the composition is the same, you can easily do this by adding something that has the same color or the same texture to it. Whenever I do a digital illustration, this is a technique that I like to use. So right now when I see this, I see there's something, you know, there's dark blues and light blues, there's a really dark area, a really light area. To unify it, I'm going to place this cotton candy picture, which kind of has one unified color and one unified texture, into this one. So File and Place, and where is it? Cotton candy. As with the other one, we're just going to place it on top of everything. You can scale it and resize it as necessary. And we're going to change the transparency mode to Overlay. Now when I do that, it kind of makes everything a shade of orange. You know, it tints the blues towards orange. It tints the darker areas, lightens them up towards orange, and it adds this really cool texture to everything that's on there. As with the other one, you can adjust the opacity, but you can see the difference of one side to the other side. Just adds a little bit to there, and you can add different textures to it for your compositions. Essentially, this is what you're creating. You're using all of the tools to make one particular picture, and you can add more details to it if you want to add highlights to the mountains or little different things to what's in the desert. That's totally up to you. To print this off, like I said, we're going to clean it up by choosing the rectangle and just make some white rectangles along each edge. That covers up everything. Didn't make that one on the right wide enough. Once it's all covered up, this is what I'm looking for. You can go and print this to the color printer, sign your name to it, and turn it in for today. Any questions before I let y'all go? Okay, all right.